So good morning. Welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival. My name is Andrea Picard, and I'm the lead programmer for Wavelines. Lovely to see you all here on this Saturday, I guess almost afternoon. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this morning's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. The Grand Bazaar, which you're going to see today by Jody Mac, is eligible for 2 awards. It's eligible for the Grolsch People's Choice Award and also the Documentary Award. So please don't forget to vote at tiff.net/vote. And we would like to thank Alina Film for providing us with Those Who Desire, Los que Desean. What shall I say? So Wavelines also includes short film programs, as you know, and we like to pair up and curate things when they're of various lengths. We think it's very important to champion medium-length work within large festivals as well, because I think we really trust that filmmakers know when their films are done and complete, and we like to show a wide gamut of films. So the 2 films that we've paired today are exceedingly different, but there are some really nice semblances, but the modes of filmmaking are very different. And I think that also we really want to champion young, talented filmmakers and to put them on a big stage together as well. Jody Mack is probably known to this audience, and she showed a film last night, Hoarders Without Borders, which is really great. She's known for her 16mm animation, and I think someone once described her as a balm to the avant-garde, and that she's very light, and there's have sparkles and rhythm and a lot of joy and happiness. And we feel that way about this film as well. And we're really happy to have Elena Lopez Riera here as well with her new film that just won an award at Locarno. Both these films premiered at Locarno. And this is a documentary which is very sly, intelligent, and elegant. And I'm so pleased that they're both here to introduce the film and to speak with you today. Please welcome Jody Mack and Elena Lopez Riera. Who wants to go first?
Elena? Okay, Elena. So thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. He's going to translate me because I can barely speak English and it's very bad, so maybe he's going to help me. I feel really honored to be here in part of Wavelines. It's my first time in Canada, and it's amazing that this little film that I made in my hometown in south of Spain with all my love and with bueno, ahora ya empiezo en español porque I'm sorry. Bueno, que es una película que hice con gente de mi familia, de mi pueblo, y que para mí es como muy excitante y extraño al mismo tiempo estar en Canadá con
Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'd like to say that the film I'm going to present is a very intimate film that involves my family, the hometown where I grew up in Spain. And it's very exciting to present this film, and also strange in Canada.
I just want to say thank you, and I feel very honored also to share this screening with Jody Mac. Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the film.
Good morning / afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Andrea and Jesse and other members of the Wavelengths team for including my film. And thank you to Elena for being here. I'm also very honored to be screening alongside you. My film, The Grand Bazaar, is an exercise in getting lost. It's a study of pattern and the way that it transmutes itself through textiles, rhythm, and language, specifically through the lens of global trade. Fabrics are our stars here, and it's a journey around the world in 60 minutes that sort of documents the lack of origin we can find within the many patterns that surround us in our daily materials. And I hope you'll enjoy it.
Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming back to the stage Jody Mack and Elena Lopez Riera. And thank you as well to David, who will be doing some interpretation for us. So there's plenty of time for questions, but maybe I thought we would start with your film, Jody. I'd be curious to know, this is such a huge, thrilling trip around the globe. I was kind of curious to know how you went about determining where and what to shoot, and then I'm sure assembling it was its own challenge. How did you decide what goes where and what you keep, what you don't?
Thank you for your question, Jesse, and thank you all for still being here, not leaving. The film started being shot in locations where I was invited to show other films. I've never really had the means to travel by myself, and making films and exhibiting films is the way I have found the ability to travel. So it all sort of worked out by coincidence. I was invited to Mexico, and there was a weaver who wanted to meet me because they knew that I worked with textiles, and we started a thing from there. And then I was also invited to China and to India. So these things just sort of amassed over time. And after I had been around and just sort of shooting, we come to these film festivals and everyone seems really comfortable, yet I actually feel very uncomfortable. And I have a lot of nervous energy to get out. And so I just need to kind of like leave the festival for a second and go shoot. I'm actually still shooting this movie right now. So that was a location. There were three parts to your question, right?
Just how you put it all together.
I didn't. It's still not finished. As I said, I'm still shooting. Putting it together.
Did you ever consider like putting notes to specify where the locations were? Actually,
yes, I did. That was the problem of putting it together, was that I had option paralysis, and there were many directions that I could take this. There was a version with narration, and there was a version with text. There was a version where we knew exactly where we were going. But in the end, I felt like I was after more of an every place feeling or a sense of simultaneity. So I decided to edit based on motifs that I had accidentally captured along the way, like mirrors or seascapes, rural locations, places of textile production, things like that.
Patterns. Questions from the audience. There's one in the back.
Jody, some of our earliest computers are punch-card-driven weighting machines and also musical instruments like calliope. I'm really seeing a lot of this in your film of the digital and the analog and how these things are interwoven and not really so broken apart that we think of it. Just amazing.
Thank you so much. May I respond to that? Thank you.
Please.
I also see that relationship too, and of course I think we all feel that, especially within the contemporary work of someone like Beryl Corot, who draws those connections so clearly between the development of the Jacquard loom and binary code, right? And to me, it's a very special history because and especially regarding image and sound. Because, of course, I'm an animator, and the way I see things historically is that the way that computer animation developed, it developed side by side with electronic sound. And those are the first times where we begin to actually standardize time computationally before we may have a metronome to keep on beat. But before the invention of computer music or computer animation, you always had a disparate sense between written music and played music, right? It was always going to be different, played with a group than written on the page. So this idea of standardizing time and also standardizing pitch, to me, there's a real hand-holding going on between this development of sound and image, which of course allows for things to be made easier and faster, and brings us to today, where we have something like GarageBand or Photoshop, which are proprietary softwares that give us the illusion of tools for creativity when you really only get a program with like a finite amount of samples or a finite amount of colors or line types. So this was a really important relationship that I intended to explore in the film, though not heavy-handed.
A question here in the front.
But did you also sign your shoes came from the first wave era, rhythm music, acid house music? Why specifically this period?
So the question is about the music, why you focused on this era of electronic music, if I understand.
I actually don't see the electronic music in the piece as focusing on one genre. To me, there were different types. Like, yes, this is tipping its hat to house music. This is tipping its hat to like an R&B slow jam or something like that. And that was to me because in all my travels, I heard the same music everywhere I went. Drake, Beyonce, top 10, walking into Mumbai airport being like, yes, India and Drake. And so you find this in Toronto. Drake is here, right? I did invite him on Twitter.
I heard Drake 5 minutes ago on King Street.
I think he's busy. But there's something to the homogenization of music that occurs today where you could be anywhere and listen to the same music. You could be anywhere and walk into a Starbucks. You could be anywhere and walk into a Krispy Kreme donut shop, as it has, or an Olive Garden. And I'm really fascinated by cultures that have really complicated and intricate musical histories, yet then again dumb these musical structures down into the sort of 4/4 guise of pop music.
And then maybe I can ask you a little bit about your film. It's only 24 minutes, but it shifts a lot. It's quite a sly film, and it's ostensibly a film about pigeons, but I think it's as much about the trainers. And I want to ask you how you went about structuring it and kind of going about navigating this movement between the pigeons and their trainers.
Or maybe need some translation. Yeah. Sí, sí, no. I understand that for my answer. Yeah. O sea, en realidad como no tenía un plan previo antes de montar y fue un poco por feeling, por sentimientos y un poco por motivos, como decía Jody. Por una parte estaban los hombres y por otro las palomas, y para mí sí que había un paralelismo entre los dos mundos, pero es un paralelismo visceral más que intelectual.
Well, I didn't have a script or a plan to make this movie. I think I'm more of an intuitive person. It was guided more by feeling, and like Jody, I also had a couple of motifs as well. And in the film, you can see a clear parallelism between the man and the pigeons.
No, sí bien. Other questions from the audience? Yes. The questions about the film frame as an intimate object and how it relates to textiles.
Sure. Well, I actually found a lot of similarities with the textile makers that I met because, like if you're weaving on a loom, you're sort of going one row at a time, one thread at a time. And in the same way, when I was working with them, I think it was very different than a normal documentary setup, of course, because I was taking things frame by frame. And of course, there are many relationships between the history of cinema and the history of textiles, be it the development of train tracks and sprocket holes, and the flight industry at the same time. These things are fundamentally related as either means to travel physical space or portals to travel virtual space, right? This portal that we have right here being the cinema screen. And it's funny that you mentioned the molecular level because I've gotten a lot of readings about sort of like microscopic biological forms representing notions of universality and things like that. The diamond becoming to me an information vortex, but to other people a mouth, or to perhaps the people who designed it, a mountain and its reflection in the lake, things like that. So it's a very rich area for me. That's an answer.
Yeah, there's another question in the back. questions about the maintenance of specific cultural identities of these fabrics in the film.
That's a great and fundamental central question to this project. If we wanted to, we could continue this Q&A by going to Marshall's together around the corner, and we could start to look at many of the patterns that we might find on the clothes and the suitcases, and we could all agree possibly that many of these patterns do have cultural origins that are invisible to us in the same way that the labor to create them is invisible to us. The first place I shot was in Mexico, for example, and you might look at this pattern and say, look at this pattern, it's inherently Mexican. Well, what does it mean to be Mexican? You had to be colonized first by the Spanish and new technologies brought over and this and that. So to me, what was so interesting about locating the origin of language or codification within the patterns was that there was always going to be an amalgamation of a cross-colonial relationship within many of the textiles. And when you go deep into the history, you might find a very similar pattern in sort of like pre-Columbian cultures as you would in Iran or something like that. So I think that there's a very cloudy and complicated question here as far as origin and also the idea of private property, right? Because to me, it was sort of like, well, yes, this is horrible that we're selling these diamonds in Marshall's, and also that I'd like to buy that shirt because it looks really cool and I want to wear it. But also that the notions of origin are really unclear at this point, because there was another dimension of it, right? Like, let me learn the history of this, where does that take me? To the library. What does that find me doing? Looking through a book. In the age of fake news and the internet, where information is so malleable, my personal perspective is that I can't necessarily trust what I find in a book, because the book would have also been written by the person who is in the privileged matter to write the book. Right? And I encountered this a lot with textile weavers who I would meet, and they would say, oh, someone came and wrote a book about this, but they didn't go into our language enough. And so in the book, they just translate this certain type of plant as plant instead of the type of plant that it was, you know? So to me, it sort of unveiled this problem of systemics when it comes to the documentation of information on a lot of these things. So it wasn't only just about the patterns, if that makes sense.
Elena, I wanted to ask you another question about your film. One of my favorite parts about it is the voiceover with these rules that as it reads them out throughout the thing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about who makes these rules, who determines them, whether it's a sort of a society, and if you sort of spend time with it, how long these competitions have been going on for.
Yeah. I'm going to try it in English, and if I need help, I call you. Okay. So these are the real rules of the of this sport, actually, and this is a very old sport, like from the Edad Media, from the Middle Age, kind of origin, but also, I mean, even if they are very different film, I found some very important question, both of them, like kind of origin things, because originally it comes from the Arabs when they were living in Spain, because they have a very special relationships with pigeons, and then this become like this sport, very strange sport. We can see here. So those are the real rules, but I just pick some articles that I was interested on, and for me it was very important just to mark this was my choice. This is why I put 32, 47, because it's the way I see this sport. This is not about reality or objectivity. This is my point of view of this particular world, and this is something that I have not in mind when I before the shooting. This is something that came up afterwards when we were editing, because one of the guys that the one who's painting the pigeon offered me a little book with the rules, and then I said like, wow, this is maybe the clear, it's something that you never must have to do in a contemporary film, like using the rules, like in an old scientific documentary style. This is why I did it, because everyone told me, no, don't do that. I don't know if it's work, but I feel like it was a very big struggle between this kind of poetic thing and very aseptic scientific rules.
I quite like it personally. Yes, there's a question right here. Questions about the female pigeon in Los
Yeah, I think
Cadestians.
she's suffering a little bit. I don't know. We never know because she's like in the middle of all the males colored, and she's not colored. Actually, she has just a white pluma, feathers, and I mean, I think she's suffering actually, but like we are suffering when when I'm in my little town and we party and you are like, traditionally like surrounded by men, and I mean like it's like this, and from centuries. She's not supposed to suffering because there are very strong rules right now. When she's blooding or something, they stopped the competition, but still, I think it's not very. I think she's not having fun.
Other questions? Yeah, there's a hand up here.
Yeah.
Question is about who cares for the female pigeon? We see the trainers for the male.
The same. What is very very interesting and for me very very complex also, because I don't want to judge these people, is that they really love their pigeons, and they are the same guys that they are taking care of the males. They are also taking care of the female, and they have really. And this is something I didn't put at the end on the film, because this is another discussion, but it's all the training part and all the, when they are at home and they have this really kind of templo, how do you say? Temple of the birds, of the pigeons, and they really take care of them and talk to them, and they are they are eating very good food and very good champagne, and they are the same. So for them, it's not, they cannot, for them, there's nothing bad about this. But this is another problem, that they cannot even think about how the females feel. So this is why it's complex for me.
I think we might have time for one more question. Yes, in the center here. Questions about finding optimism in the films that have certain darkness of homogenization of culture, as well as the masculinity of your film.
Yeah, I'm super depressed right now. And, Adam left, but to go back to his question, and to go back to one of your questions, one of the potential routes of this film was to adopt the role of this narrator, professor oppressor, Candy the Rapper. Where, you could really call oneself out about participating in this whole thing. But the saddest thing is, it's just kind of the stuff we're swimming in. And I have a lot of cynicism and uncomfortable feelings. Like even in the beginning of these screenings, as we thank the indigenous tribes for the land that we're having this film festival on, I think this sort of brings up the root of being complicit, like we could also just give it back to them and not have the film festival. So yeah, whatever it, or just knock it down. And so this is my problem now, is that I just see these systems so clearly and I feel locked into it and I don't know how to dismantle it. And I'm not optimistic whatsoever, but I'm going to try to be. That said, you know, I met so many beautiful people, and there are so many beautiful people in this room together. It's really a slippery slope. That's why the mirrors are in my film, because it's about this sort of feedback chamber of like, is tourism unethical, or do we provide economies for people? Or if we stopped having tourism, would their economy develop on its own? Back and forth to Elena.
Wow. Thank you, Jody. So I'm completely lost. I don't know where I am after this film, because in one hand I have this kind of male domination, which is very clear, but not just in this sport. I mean, at home with my family, with the whole history of my country, and so on. So I see that very clear, but I really love these people. And when I watch this film, I really love them. I cannot judge them. They are beautiful. They are doing something that they love. So I don't really want to put my intellectual position of I'm living in Paris, and now I'm making films, and now I go back home and say, okay, I'm doing a film about your ancestral and all thing. I mean, no, I really do. I really love them. Maybe this is why the film finished like I'm going, and I don't know. I'm just saying your names, and I don't know. Sorry.
There's darkness, but there's a bit of love in both. So that's maybe the best note we can end on. Thank you for coming, and please thank our filmmakers, Jody and Elena, and David as well.
I love you.